Alright, hello lesser creatures. This is the Sekiro Advanced Combat Guide, namely, the Guide to Combat Arts, something I feel is strongly misunderstood when it comes to Sekiro. And to help with this guide, I've downloaded a number of mods, including the Numbers mod, which will help prove my point. And almost 2,000 spirit emblems later, I've made a comprehensive sheet on the different values. Before I tell you what these are, let me be clear on what they are not. Combat arts are not super weapons. A lot of players use combat arts and expect it to start leaking damage numbers. These combat arts and prosthetic tools are utility tools, meant to fulfill certain roles and change up your playstyle. While some are meant to do more damage, that is just one of several aspects. The factors that matter are your playstyle, the opponent you're facing, and what move you're using this against. I've seen some people say just parrying is more efficient, but I've tested this on numerous enemies and bosses and recorded nearly 200 gigabytes of footage to compare, and I'm not seeing any notable difference in time. The only time it actually made an impact was when I used a combat art or prosthetic inefficiently. Otherwise, the only thing that changed was ease of use. Also, these are not easy buttons. You can't just press a button and go unga bunga your way to victory. Even when the tools are strong, you need to use them properly. A common trend you'll notice is that a lot of these have a free version and a superior version that costs spirit emblems. It's all just a matter of how you want to play. And there'll be another trend. There's when you can use it and when you should use it. Can just means when there's an opening to use it safely, but should is a matter of optimization. How to get the most out of your art. Generally speaking, fast combat arts like praying strikes or floating passage can be used at any time, but it should be used at specific moments and manners. Slower combat arts like Ichimonji, Mortal Draw, and High Monk can be used after a Makiri, after jumping a sweep if you start in the air, or if you get access to the back. But there are other factors to consider. Some arts you want to hit the back with, and some you want to use only after Makiri. But just because the most optimal way to play is very specific, nobody's holding a gun to your head and forcing you not to use other methods. And considering most people don't even play the game the right way, there are countless venues to explore. So feel free to use these combat arts however you want. Got it? Something to note is that all the damage values are relative to one sword swing. Why? Because health and damage values change. They stay the same relative to each other. Also, I find it easy to understand as opposed to just damage numbers. Another thing to note is that on block, health and posture damage is halved. Of course, that's assuming there's chip. Otherwise, health damage drops to 0. And on parry, it's halved again. One more thing to consider are buffs, and how they interact with the weapons. We have the straightforward ones like the sugars, which buff all attacks. And I mean all of them. Kicks, punches, bounces, air slices. Or shall I say, all direct attacks. Things such as afterburn, poison, and anti-illusion weapons are not affected by the sugars. Akko increases health damage by 12% and posture damage by 25%. Yashirigu's Sugar halves your health, but in exchange, it increases your health damage by 25% and posture damage by 50%. They'll affect chip only if the move already did chip. Otherwise, the damage is reduced to 0 on block. But if you use the sword buffs, now this is where things get interesting. I'm talking about Divine Confetti and Imbue. Generally speaking, they increase your sword damage by 25%, while not affecting your posture damage. And I do mean sword damage. Your kicks, punches, air slices, none of them are affected. Only your sword. It also now deals chip damage, at minimum, of 0.19 points of damage. However, some combat arts actually get greater damage buffs than others, and I'll cover them as I go forward. And then there is Bestowal. Once again, it only impacts your sword. If your sword isn't doing the damage, it won't be affected. But the buff is additive rather than multiplicative. Rather than, say, increase your damage by 12% or 25% or so on, Bestowal creates a Blood Blade that deals 0.5 health damage and 0.5 posture damage. And on block, it deals 0.38 chip damage. Now that we have the trends out of the way, let's get to business. First thing we're going to cover is our standard attack. Yes, we need to cover this as it helps establish a baseline. This thing is going to be your bread and butter. It is the most efficient and most reliable method of dealing damage. While some combat arts lose effectiveness and are sometimes even not recommended against certain bosses and enemies, your sword swing is your best friend who you can always count on. One hit against bare flesh deals 1 point of health damage, 1 point of posture damage, and 1 point of poise damage. Stab does 1.5 points of damage, and 0.66 posture damage, and 2 poise damage, which admittedly means it's in the disappointing department, if all you want is numbers. It already takes the time of 2 sword swings, and it does less health and posture damage and the same poise damage. But wait, there's a give and a take. Stabs have a longer range than normal attacks. You'll lunge forward with your attacks, and as a stab, these cannot be blocked, only deflected. Before your exchanges start, there is an awkward moment of who gets to go first, and I can think of several deathless runs that ended because of this. You can use the stab to take the first move due to superior range and poise. Our first combat art will be Nightjar and Nightjar Reversal. You can see that its damage values across the board are nothing special, but the purpose of this is to control distance. A lot of enemies you want to keep the pressure on. So, when they run away, Nightjar after them. Yeah, Shuriken into Chasing Slice is superior, but this is free. This is most useful early game because of a lot of mini-bosses tend to scoot back so they can do certain attacks. And you can chase them down and stop them. Any enemy or boss you need to chase down, this is good against. This is good against Lady Butterfly, chasing her down so she can't summon her illusions. You see, I kept chasing her down, so she couldn't even summon once. Also good against the Shinobi Owl, who keeps running away. Chasing him down, so he doesn't get the chance to regen his posture. This is really good against the Nightjar ninjas, who always disengage and run away. New players struggle against the Shinobi Hunter, namely getting the Makiri timing down. But he has to back up to stab you, and when he does, chase him down. Seven Spears is another mini-boss this art is good against. I've seen some people say they struggle with Genichiro's triple bow shot. If you constantly chase him down with Nightjar Slash, he can't do this. Of course, this is weak against enemies that don't jump back. And I know that list is long, but that's where the upgrade comes into play. Then there is Nightjar Reversal, which is the distance maker. A lot of players have the concept that it's all or nothing, i.e., you stand there and perfect parry every attack, or you mess up and die. But it doesn't have to be like that. If your posture gets too high, sometimes it's better to just back out of the fight. Especially if you know that the enemy is going to counterattack. So let them swing at air while your posture recovers. If your posture is uncomfortably high, use Nightjar reversal to back up, even heal if you're injured. Adding distance also changes the dynamic of certain moves. Once again, Genichiro's arrows, much easier to dodge from a distance. While not providing any obvious advantage, it changes the dynamic of many fights, able to close distance on a whim to apply pressure, or exit the fight to perform actions like heal yourself, drain posture, or make certain attacks more dealable. You can even use this against giants if you play your cards right. This is weak against enemies with massive range, whether that be from the length of their weapon, or them literally chasing you down whenever you leap away. Next up is Whirlwind Slash, a helpful tool against ganks since both attacks deal good chip damage. Here's the thing about ganks in Sekiro, they aren't as bad as in other Souls games. You're much faster, and you don't lose stamina while sprinting, so run away and try to fight enemies in manageable groups. What's the issue? You begin fighting someone and you do fine, merely to have the goon squad catch up with you, so you run away and your hard work and posture gets undone. Chip damage makes up for that, making sure every encounter has something, even if blocked. The chip damage of the Whirlwind Slash is only slightly less than one hit of normal health damage. You can do this preemptively at groups, hitting multiple targets and then running out of there. This combat art is not an invitation to stand in the middle of a crowd. Getting out of a crowd maybe, but don't just jump into the middle of a dog pile and expect to come out on top. You can also use this in single combat, especially in the opening gambit, when the boss's health is so high they'll just recover their posture anyways. You can use Whirlwind Slash to reduce their health through their block. It becomes more effective with sword buffs, which actually go past the standard 25% increase. This is used for just about anyone that blocks your attacks, which encompasses a majority of enemies in the game. Because of the chip, fast startup, and 0 Spirit Emblem cost, you can break away from the parry mode and play chicken with this a little. I see newer players spot an opening, then use Whirlwind Slash in it. Whirlwind Slash does less damage than normal Slash. You want to use this to damage through block, not on flesh. This is not useful against giants or opponents who don't block or have enormous attack windows for direct health hits. Your sword has higher DPS, so you're better off using that. Another risk is the spam punish. Because of how long Whirlwind Slash takes to use, if they initiate spam punish while you're still using it, you're a sitting duck. Which may lead you to wonder why use this over other members of the chip family like Floating Passage and Spiral Cloud Passage. And it's true, both deal more chip damage than Whirlwind Slash, but they do it over a longer period of time. And if you don't have that time, you're better off using Whirlwind Slash. There is also an issue of stagger. The passage arts have very little poise to it, so if Genichiro goes in to shoot you, you'll need to stop on a dime to react to that, whereas Whirlwind Slash has the poise damage to interrupt him. You see, this is a bad situation to be in. A horde of mooks and some purple ninjas on my ass. But I use Whirlwind Strikes on every engagement, dealing chip damage to several enemies with every move. Then I retreat. Same here with the red guard. But you're probably thinking, look how inefficient this is. Well, for one, this is a really bad position to be in. If you're here, you've royally messed up. For another, okay, let's add some other tools to the mix. Let's add Bestowal. A 2v1 against 2 higher level enemies is tricky, but the same applies. I can't get any meaningful engagement since the other guy keeps interrupting me, so I use Whirlwind Slash to leave a lasting impression. You know what, let's move on to the floating passage. Just about all combat arts become useless when you unlock their upgraded version. There's no reason to use normal Nightjar Slash when you have Reversal, which lets you do both. There's no reason to use normal Prank Strikes once you unlock Exorcism, which lets you do that and more. But Floating Passage is different, as it remains viable even after you unlock the Spiral Cloud Passage. For one, Spiral Cloud Passage is very expensive to purchase, and you probably won't have it for a significant chunk of time. Not only that, Spiral Cloud Passage also costs Spirit Emblems, while Floating Passage is free. There are also some dynamic issues. Let's break down Floating Passage first. 2 sets of double slashes, finished up by one last slash. All slashes do chip damage, and the final slash has good poise damage. As mentioned, Floating Passage is free, so feel free to spam it. The shorter combo also has its uses. Namely, there's a chance the enemy goes for a spam punish merely for it to get hit by the final attack and interrupted. This move suppresses enemies into blocking, letting you deal health damage and extending your turn. And this isn't sweet nothings either. If you can complete a full floating passage, the chip damage is equivalent to 1 sword swing. Plus, the move is a good way to proc status effects. Status effects like burn are based on the number of sword hits, and the passage arts do 2 sword hits in the time it does to do normal one, literally doubling how fast you proc status. Combined with the suppressive nature of the floating passage, enemies will stand there and let themselves catch on fire. This move is strong against enemies that block, especially if they are not prone to spam punish. They will stand there and watch you kill them. This move is not good against enemies that don't block, nor is it good against guys who are prone to ignore you. Like the Whirlwind Slash, you want to make sure you get them to acknowledge the attack. With so little poise damage, some enemies like Owl will ignore you and just hit you, so be on your toes if they don't care. And like before, your sword has higher DPS, so if you have a clear shot in the body, just use normal sword. But this changes if you factor in sword buffs. Imbue, and Divine Confetti. Floating Passage with sword buffs has the same DPS as a normal sword swing with sword buffs. Okay, I know, that sounds like a cop-out. But remember the chip damage it has, and the longer combo string. This means you can just use Floating Passage against Flesh or against Guard. So you can bury enemies in attacks if you don't want to deal with them. Something to keep in mind is that the rate of status effect proccing is based on sword swings. So they may catch fire in the middle of your combo, which secures a free follow-up combo. If your sword is covered in fire, then it's more efficient to use Floating Passage instead. The wild swinging also means the pistol art wrecks enemies. While this works against most swordsmen because of how likely they are to block and get killed by chip, this is particularly useful against purple ninja and midgets with high posture and low health. In fact, generally speaking, you want to use this against low health, high posture, especially if they're super aggressive.
Deja vu, I just been in this place before. Higher on the street, and I know it's my time to go. Going new, and the search is a mystery. Standing on my feet, it's so hard.
You can use this against Corrupted Monk if you're careful. It memes Orin. It kicks the shit out of 7 Spears. And it trivializes those dual-wielding monkeys. I've seen many call these the 3 hardest mini-bosses in the game because of their fierce attacks. And Floating Passage erases them by forcing them to do nothing but block and damaging them through it. If you want to use this against giants, you'll need to use a sword buff to get returns, especially fire. Bosses is also where things take a turn. Bosses have massive health pools, and you'd only do about 1 point of health damage and posture damage through block, so using this will draw out your battles. There is also an issue that many bosses will ignore your attack, and because of how low your poise damage is, they won't get interrupted. If you use this against bosses, you need specific openings. For Owl, do it from the front after certain attacks. His forward somersault, or his firecrackers. Instead of running away to his backside, back up, then floating passage back in. I also wouldn't recommend this on Inner Owl because of his teleport spam punish, which he loves to abuse. Everything I said applies to the Spiral Cloud Passage, which comes with several more caveats. For every double slash, you now get an additional air slash that also does damage. And one more air slash for the final slash. This gets you 4 pairs of double slashes, resulting in 9 sword slashes in total, but include the air slash and you're hitting your foe with 14 hits. The entire combo casts 3 spirit emblems, with one being used for every 2 pairs of sword slashes. I repeat, 2 pairs, meaning 4 slashes. The thing is a health melter under the right circumstances, and you really see the strength of this ability to suppress enemies as they stand there and die. With Pistol, this thing becomes an absolute meme machine. If you stack buffs, this thing becomes the single most damaging combat art in the entire game, even more than Empowered Mortal Draw, 4 fewer spirit emblems and faster startup. The downside is that you need those extra sword buffs. Also, it comes out over a longer period of time. Same strengths and weaknesses as Floating Passage, though with one more weakness. The final move in Floating Passage has good poise damage and can interrupt low level attacks, so if they go for a spam punish, they get hit and interrupted. The same cannot be said for Spiral Cloud Passage, which is so long you'll probably be a ways away from the final hit, so you have to stop on your own accord. I guess I should segue into another suppression move, that being Praying Strike's Exorcism. This is yet another suppression move, but instead of dealing ship damage, it deals posture damage. All moves deal a tiny bit of health damage, but you won't be using Praying Strikes for its damage dealing. Keep in mind, you build enemy posture even if your attack gets blocked, so why use this over Floating Passage? For one, more posture per hit. For another, can be chained from your normal attacks, whereas Floating Passage cannot. More attacks from you means less attacks from them. I've seen people compare this to Ichimonji, which does do more posture damage on hit, and while this is true, you'll get more posture damage overall from Praying Strikes through sheer frequency you can use this. Floating Passage loses some utility against bosses because of their larger health pool, but Praying Strike's Exorcism is viable against human bosses as long as you take every opportunity to deal health damage to keep the posture you make. But something a lot of people don't consider is the poise damage. Man, does this thing poise. Suppression really is the name of the game, and it's really easy to stagger opponents. Of course, now is a question of who you want to stagger. After all, most enemies stagger from normal sword hits. Giants, and anyone prone to ignoring your hits, especially if they have large stun states. The con is that Praying Strikes has abysmal range, so for some bosses, you need to maneuver yourself into the right position. But this balances out, I guess, since otherwise, you can just stun lock them. Also, posture recovers without health damage, so you need to stay aggressive and find ways to get in that sweet, sweet health damage, or you'll lose your progress. This is strong against the Taro Troop, Axe Bandits, and those experiments in the Ashina dungeon. Watch me stunlock the Blazing Bull. And this guy, whatever his name is.
My name is Kyobu Masataka Oniwa! Allow me to show you the wrath of a man!
It can also be used against just about any swordsman. Unlike Floating Passage, which runs at the risk of your opponent ignoring your attack, the enemy is more likely to stop and block your parrying strikes. So that's the aim of the game. Get the enemy to spend more time blocking you and deal posture damage through the guard. Or stagger giants and set up for more powerful attacks. Orin gets her face beaten in by this. Animal abuse has never been easier with the Elder Monkeys. Seven spears can only stop and stare. This is also effective against Shinobi Owl and Owlfather. In case of Shinobi Owl, it actually changes up the dynamic of the fight, as he is more likely to leap out of the way and then charge back in, rather than leap off your head and use shuriken or poison. Who is this weak against? Corrupted Monk doesn't stagger much. This can be used for the Demon of Hate, but really his openings are so large you're better off using a sword. Despite this being good against the other owls, I wouldn't recommend this for Inner Owl thanks to his new Spam Punish move. If you really want to use this against Inner Owl, don't use the last move. The recovery for it is too long, which lets him hit you. If you get access to someone's back and you're after posture damage, this can work. But if you want health damage, then you'll want to use something else. A fully charged Praying Strike's Exorcism has massive stagger, which can interrupt moves you don't like. And with even greater poise damage, it's even easier to stagger enemies. Something to keep in mind is that you can only charge your strike on the ground. You start in the air, you'll get the weaker first strike. Next up is Kendo's classic Men Strike, also known as the Ichimonji. A very good tool for beginners for the simple reason it drains posture. It does some health and posture damage, but you won't be using Ichimonji for the damage dealing. You'll be using it to drain your posture and to stay in the game. The question is when you can do it because of how long it takes. After any Makiri, you can do Ichimonji. There are some exceptions like Ishin's Spear Stab or 7 Spears if he shoves you off, but these are exceptions. You can also do this if you start in mid-air after jumping a sweep, or after you reach an opponent's back. Its strength is its ease of use, but its weakness is lack of versatility. Emptying your posture and staggering enemies is just about the only things you'll use this for. Double donks will not change up the dynamic of the fight. This is strong against just about all swordsmen across the board as long as you have the right window, but it's useless against giants. Ashina Cross is the classic quick draw, sheathing your sword before performing a quick draw attack. Its timing is the same as Ichimonji, but it has other openings as well, because unlike Ichimonji, you can hold the attack, and when you do attack, you get good forward momentum. While holding the cross, you can instantly cancel out into a block or dodge. I'm using keyboard and mouse, so I'll be referring to it. To prepare Ashina Cross, you'll be holding both left click and right click at the same time, so both light attack and block. To cancel into block, lift your middle finger, you know, the one holding the block button, then hold it back down again. This will cancel the sheath into a block. It doesn't matter if you release the left click or not, but if you do, only do it after you release the right. If you release the left click before the right, it will fire off into Ashina Cross. I.e., if you're holding the Ashina Cross, tap the block button. But the big deal of Ashina Cross is damage. Which sounds weird, I know. There are other combat arts meant to deal damage, and are better at it, but they always come with caveats. Mortal Draw's single attack deals the same as Ashina Cross, and for more spirit emblems. Empowered Mortal Draw does more damage, but it's still less spirit emblem efficient than Ashina Cross. One Mind does have better damage emblem efficiency, but it's over a longer period of time. Same with Spiral Cloud Passage. And if we look at the free combat arts, they don't do as much damage. Ashina Cross is generally the most efficient way to deal burst damage. In the timing window it takes to do 2 hits, you get 3 points of damage for 2 spirit emblems. Some bosses have chasing attacks. If you like to jump away a lot, you can use Ashina Cross to interrupt these. Be warned, the stagger comes from the second hit, so attack early. This is not a chasing art. If I take Nightjar Slash for example, Lady Butterfly runs away, I use Nightjar to chase after her, and make sure she doesn't summon her illusions. Same with Shinobi Hunter. Ashina Cross takes too long to do that. But if the Shinobi Hunter backs up and preps a stab, I then use Ashina Cross to interrupt him. Same with 7 Spears. Same with Owl. He has to come back in, and I can interrupt him with Ashina Cross. Once again, use it when you have access to a person's back. You see here, when I use a normal attack, I get 2 hits, and thus 2 points of damage. With Ashina Cross, I get 3. So when you fight someone and you can think of a window where you can sneak a hit in, try hitting it with Ashina Cross instead. This is good against just about every swordsman, getting in bursts of damage at certain points. Now, it's rather weak against giants. The plan of sneaking in bursts of attack directly to health doesn't apply when there are just massive openings, or it's simpler to just use normal attacks which are free. You can use Ashina Cross after ending Makiri or jumping a sweep if you start in the air, but I don't recommend this. If you do this, sure you'll fire it off, but they'll block your attacks. Try to get Ashina Cross to deal health damage on bare flesh, so use it when you get access to their back, or when you can catch them chasing you. Combined poise damage means that this thing can interrupt moves you don't want to deal with. In many ways, one mind can be seen as the upgrade to Ashina Cross. The initial slash has stagger, as opposed to the second, and has better damage cost efficiency. Land it all against flesh and you're getting 5 points of damage and 5 points of posture damage for 3 spirit emblems, making it the most cost efficient combat art. Downside is how long it takes to complete this. Bosses like Owl can haphazardly leap out of it, assuming he doesn't ignore it entirely. And giants will not acknowledge the hits. From a safety standpoint, this is okay since you can dodge out of the animation, so you land all but the last hit. But that's damage you're missing out on. If you don't get that last hit, that's 3 points of damage and 3.5 posture for 3 Spirit Emblems, putting it on par with 1 hit of Mortal Draw, and less Spirit Emblem efficient than Ashina Cross. Compare that to say something like Floating Passage. Yeah, Owl can jump away from that, but Floating Passage is free, and you can start and stop it on a whim. It's still good against chasers like Enichiro, Ishin, and the Shinobi Hunters, as well as being a cost-efficient attack for its Spirit Emblems. If you want to use this against giants, you'll want to secure your window. Same with Owl. It's safe to use with him, but jumping away like he does, you're better off using those Spirit Emblems somewhere else. Its usage and utility is the same as Ashina Cross, but in this case, you wanted to try to use it on guys who won't run away. It's even easier to catch chasers now that you only have to hit them with the first slash. And I've never seen anyone except Ish and Ashina block the Phantom Slashes. High Monk is a gap closer that leads into a suppressive chain. Once again, the timing is the same as Ichimonji, Ashina Cross, and One Mind. Difference is, this is a jump, so you can spend most of the time in the air avoiding sweep attacks. Where this art shines to the point of blinding is if you use this kick in response to a sweep. It'll do 4 points of posture damage. And from there, you can continue down the combo, which can suppress the enemy the same way Praying Strikes and Floating Passage can. If you use this against a sweep, it's the second highest posture dealing combat art. Even if the other attacks get blocked, you'll net a total of 5.75 points of posture damage, 7.5 points of posture damage if it hits flesh. For reference, Empowered Mortal Draw does 5 points of posture damage per attack for 3 Spirit Emblems. Even if you don't use the kick in response to a sweep, it's still okay. Like I said, this is a suppressive move. If I use it against, say, Genichiro, I get 1 hit to the body, 1 block, then he parries my 3rd attack. If I use High Monk, I get the kick, double sword slash, and 1 last kick. It should be warned, there are pauses in this combo, especially between the sword slash and the last kick. So for some enemies, you might not want to use the last kick in the animation. This art is good against anything that sweeps, but also, that leaping kick has massive ground cover, so you can use it to gap close. Downside is the lack of health damage and 0 chip damage through block. While you certainly can use it after Makiri or access to back, I don't recommend it. You have a clear shot for a health hit, so use it. Instead, use High Monk in response to sweeps for posture damage, or as a gap closing move to lead into your suppression moves. If I take a moment to compare this to Praying Strikes, like High Monk, Praying Strikes are better at dealing posture damage rather than health damage since there is no chip. A flurry of low posture attacks that stack up because of how fast and frequently they can be fired. But the attacks are so fast you can kill opponents through posture even at high health. High Monk has pauses between its attacks, long enough that what little posture damage it does can come back. This can also be used to catch lightning, and with how long you spend in the air, it makes lightning catching easier. Once you catch lightning, make sure you attack before you hit the ground. Oh, you can also do this with it. Against giants, it loses a lot of utility. That's not a sweep, that's a grab. You want to deal health damage against giants, not posture. You'll be using this against swordsmen. Remember that while this thing devastates sweep, it's not useless against those who can't sweep. Also be wary of those who do sweep.
Let my guard down.
Dragon Flash is the only ranged combat art. Though you can't see it, if you lock onto an enemy, you will hit them with a ranged shockwave. If you charge it, you get another explosive shockwave. The range isn't unlimited, but it's pretty damn long. Because most of the damage from this art comes from shockwaves, you don't want to buff it with sword buffs, like Divine Confetti. You want to use sugars. For 2 Spirit Emblems, how much damage you do depends on entirely how you use it. The maximum being a fully charged point-blank range, where you get the sword, shockwave, and second shockwave. But saying that is one thing, doing it is another. It's unlikely you'll have time to charge it up all the way, and at range, your sword won't hit. The most efficient use of this art is against giants. Guardian Ape, Demon of Hatred, Corrupted Monk, Gyobu, they all have long attack chains up close that leave little room to counterattack. Not only that, they like to move around a lot. Not to mention, a lot of giants have massive stagger windows, large enough for you to perform a full close range charge for max damage potential. Against swordsmen, you can still use this against guys who are prone to leaping away, using Dragon Flash Shockwave to take out some health every time they do that. You can use this with Mist Raven to maximize your damage. Mist Raven behind them during a long combo, then sniping them with a charged shot. You can use this at close range as well. While the health damage is not the most efficient use of Spirit Emblems, it still does do good posture damage. That takes us to the next gap closer, Shadowfall. A long-range stab that, on hit, launches you into the air, and you get 2 slashes on the way down. The launch really opens up the combo ability since you can start prosthetics in the air. This in turn nets you more damage. You can use this after a Makiri, or after you get to the back. I wouldn't really bother using it after a jump. You're already in the air. Why would you spend another 2 Spirit Emblems to go back into the air? But with its distance coverage, you can use it if the opponent backs up. This is a distance closer, not a chasing technique. You want to maximize your turn as much as possible. Most combat arts don't do that with prosthetic tools. Hey, I said most, not all. This art is most useful against swordsmen of all varieties, especially if they are prone to running away, as the stab can close distance on them. I wouldn't recommend using this against the owl since he can Makiri you. But humans are contrarians. If you really insist on stabbing the owl, then do it when he's busy or distracted. The usefulness drops when you're dealing with giants, or at least giants who don't block. Most giants don't run away, and the ones that do run too far. If you hit them with this, unlike swordsmen, they'll probably just swat you out of the air. Sakura Dance is what happens when Whirlwind Slash and Spiral Cloud Passage has a baby. One thing that makes Sakura Dance unique is that it's the only combat art which receives sword buffs to its air slices. Normally any sort of air slice doesn't get impacted, but this one does, and hell does it look cool. Sakura Dance can be comboed into and out of on a whim. Also, any move in it can be parried. For most combat arts, only the last move can be parried, and it signals when it's time to change turns. But for Sakura Dance, any of its 3 hits can be parried. This effectively creates an infinite combo since you'll be continuing even after they parry you. But this is also why Sakura Dance can be dangerous. Depending on the enemy and what move they use next, there's a chance they can hit you out of the air. While the height of the Sakura Dance can protect you against a lot of attacks, a lot is not all. This makes Sakura Dance most useful against swordsmen who are likely to get interrupted or stop and block your attack. Against giants, you'll want to use this to react to sweeps. Mortal Draw is if you want big damage numbers across the board, downside being how expensive it is. For 3 Spirit Emblems, it has the same health damage as Ashina Cross, which costs 2, slightly less posture damage than Uncharged Striking Flash, which costs 2, and slightly more poise damage than fully charged Praying Strikes, which is free. Wanted it to be even more awkward? So you know Empowered Mortal Draw? If you do Mortal Draw in the air, you get the same numbers as fully empowered Mortal Draw for less time. This puts Mortal Draw in a very awkward position. At least against humans. Mortal Draw and its upgraded Powered Mortal Draw are giant killers. While there are combat arts that do the same health damage, poise damage, or posture damage, none do all 3 at the same time. And while stacking these against humans who stagger a lot with abnormal sword hits, and its very fast posture regen is overkill, using it against a giant is not. Use a leaping normal hit to max out your attack, then charge a follow-up. The goal is to use the first attack to stagger them, which then clears time for the second attack. If their poise is too high, then use normal attacks to prepare them for the Mortal Draw. You can use this as a gap closer, though you will be the one doing the closing, not the combat art. Jump at them, and then fire off Mortal Draw. Against humans, I only recommend using one when you have an opportunity to directly hit their health, such as going to their back. While you can't do this after a Mahiri or jumping a sweep, I don't recommend it. Chances are the opponent will block and negate your attack. We're trying to get as much bang for our buck, and this is an expensive combat art. I also don't recommend using the follow-up against humans. You probably won't have time to charge it, and even if you do, the enemy will just block and mitigate some of it. This all changes against giants who can't block. Alright, with that, part 1 is done. Up next, I'll be covering various prosthetics,